1. Caligula, Emperor of Rome, 37 to 41 AD. Caligula is such a well-known and enduring sensualist that a few years ago, Saturday Night Live mocked him in The Tales of Sober Caligula. Caligula was known to seduce the wives of his senators right in front of them. He used to bring home prostitutes and engage in affairs with pantomime performers. In addition to marrying 4 women, he also slept with his sisters as well. Come on, man. Caligula was a violent and insane person, so it's not hard to believe that after just 5 years on the throne, his guards killed him. 2. Henry I, King of England, 1100 to 1135. The king who holds the record of having the most illegitimate children was Henry I of England. He fathered more than 20 illegitimate kids. According to the New York Times, he is the undisputed royal record holder for fathering illegitimate children. Henry had 2 wives, Matilda of Scotland and Adeliza of Louvain. He had 2 children with Matilda and none with Adeliza. But that's not it. Thanks to his countless affairs with some very fertile women, he had a huge lineage of illegitimate children. He whored around all the time, from his teens until his death. Sex was the only game he liked. 3. Mary of Romania, Queen of Romania, 1914 to 1927. Even though her husband Ferdinand I, the king, seemed to be in charge of the kingdom, Mary was running the affairs of the state. Mary was a strong popular figure in the world, and just like other popular figures of that time, Mary wasn't a fan of monogamy either. Out of many misters she had, Prince Babu Sturby was her favorite. Many historians believe that Sturby was the real father of Mircea, her youngest son. Apart from that, Mary is said to have affairs with her newspaperman Waldorf Astor, Lieutenant Zvizzy Cantacuzene, and Canadian adventurer Joe Boyle. She didn't have just one type. 4. Henry VIII, King of England, 1509 to 1547. Henry, the most popular womanizer of the lot, set up a specific pattern very early on. Apart from having 6 wives, Henry used to have prostitutes all the time. He even slept with Mary Boleyn, his second wife's sister. It is said that he fathered 2 of her kids too. Historian Kelly Hart believes that Henry had at least 12 mistresses outside his wives. 5. Henry IV and Margaret of France, King and Queen of France, 1589 to 1599. Neither Henry nor Margaret had a simple time with the whole fidelity issue during their marriage. The Green Gallant was Henry's nickname because of his popularity among the ladies. He was known to leave his armies to shack up with one of his many mistresses, and gonorrhea nearly wiped him out. To marry Marie de' Medici of the famous and wealthy Florentine family, he annulled his childless marriage to Margaret. But Margaret herself was no nun. Out of her many affairs, the most famous one was with Joseph Boniface de la Mole, who later was tortured and executed for plotting against the king. The encyclopedia states that she was known for her licentiousness. 6. Louis XIV, King of France, 1638 to 1715. The Sun King, like Gretchen Weiners, had beautiful hair that was full of secrets. With Catherine Henriette Bellier, who essentially taught Louis XIV about the business cycle, if you know what I mean, lol. When he was a teen, his career of conquests began. Then, when he was married to Queen Mary Therese, with whom he had 6 children, he had 4 other children with this impressively named lady, a daughter with Claude Divin des Oilets, and 7 kids with Marquise de Montespan. And it was just the baby mothers. He had many other affairs as well as a secret wife in Madame de Maintenon. 7. King Edward VII, King of England, 1901 to 1910. Edward VI had a lot of nicknames that truly reflected his personality. He was called Bertie, which was a short version of his first name Albert. He was called Tum Tum because of his fat tummy. However, he was most commonly known as Edward the Caresser and Dirty Bertie, thanks to his countless mistresses and numerous sexual relationships. His mistresses included Winston Churchill's mother, the beautiful Jenny Jerome, also known as Lady Randolph Churchill. Surprisingly, he had another mistress called Alice Capel, who was the great-grandmother of Camilla Parker Bowles, the wife of the current Prince of Wales, Charles. Edward had a special sex toy called the sex chair, which he used while having sex. It is said that Edward lost his virginity when he was 19, and since then he had sex with at least 4 women every week until his death 50 years later. Historians did the math and they believe that he could have slept with between 15,000 and 18,000 women during his lifetime. 8. Pauline Bonaparte. Pauline Bonaparte was the sister of Napoleon Bonaparte, the famous emperor who came to power in the wake of the French Revolution. While her brother was occupied with his military campaigns and expanding his empire, Pauline was only interested in one thing: pleasure. As a beautiful and outspoken socialite, Pauline developed a taste for men in uniform and had sex with an array of lovers. In 1797, she married Charles Emmanuel Leclerc, a dashing general with blonde hair. But, as you might expect, Pauline wasn't faithful. While Charles was away fighting wars, Pauline juggled 3 lovers simultaneously: General Pierre de Roule, General Moreau, and General Etienne Jacques MacDonald. Pauline's attitude didn't change when she married her second husband, a wealthy Italian prince named Camillo Borghese. She had many sexual partners, including Conrad Friedrich, a German lieutenant, and Francois Joseph Talma, the famous French actor. There were even rumors that she was sleeping with Napoleon when she wasn't cheating on her husband. Pauline embraced her love of luxury by shopping in Rome and Paris, attending balls, and watching theatrical performances. She was also interested in the occult and enjoyed clairvoyance, tarot cards, and prophecies. 9. George IV. With the possible exception of Henry VIII, George IV is the most infamous king in British history. As a young prince, he developed a fondness for drinking, eating, gambling, and sexual exploits. And his attitude didn't change when he reached adulthood. By the end of the 18th century, his extravagant social life had amounted to a debt of £600,000, which is roughly £42 million in today's money. Parliament had to pay for this while George continued to live a luxurious lifestyle. What's more, his marriage to Caroline of Brunswick was far from ideal. George wasn't faithful at all. He had a multitude of mistresses and fathered many illegitimate children. And when he eventually took the throne in 1820, he continued to have an overactive sex life. But despite his excessive taste for women, George was a sad, lonely, and overweight king by the end of his reign. He gorged himself on food and died in 1830 after rupturing a blood vessel in his stomach. 10. Edward VII. Edward VII was the firstborn son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Rather than heeding his parents' advice, he spent much of his young life visiting brothels and sleeping with beautiful women in various countries. In 1861, his sexual escapades led to a scandal involving Nellie Clifton, a famous actress. Edward spent 3 nights with Nellie during a military trip to Ireland, and Prince Albert was horrified by his son's behavior. 2 years later, he ended up in court due to an affair with Harriet Mordaunt, the wife of Sir Charles Mordaunt, who had previously been a member of the Conservative Party. Edward lied to the court by denying the affair, which led to a public backlash, but despite all the negative publicity, Edward didn't change his ways. He was a regular at several brothels in Paris, and he also entertained countless prostitutes from his quarters at the Cavendish Hotel in London. Edward's overactive sex life didn't slow down as he got older. Even after his ascension to the throne in 1901, he continued to cheat on his wife with countless lovers. 11. Farouk of Egypt. Farouk of Egypt was the 10th ruler of the Muhammad Ali dynasty. When he came to the throne in 1936, he had plenty of support from his people. But as time went on, he developed an infamous reputation. In addition to gambling and spending excessively, Farouk had an unquenchable appetite for mistresses and prostitutes. He had 5 huge palaces, and they each contained a harem of women who satisfied his sexual urges. His close aide, Antonio Pulli, traveled to brothels in pursuit of beautiful women who could satisfy Farouk's desires. If a woman ever turned down the offer, Farouk resorted to kidnap or blackmail as he wanted. After he was overthrown and sent into exile, Farouk continued to have sex with many women and spend liberal amounts of money. By the end of his life, he claimed to have slept with 5,000 women. Ironically enough, there were rumors that Farouk had small genitals and struggled with erectile dysfunction. For obvious reasons, historians have been unable to confirm these claims. 12. Princess Margaret. Elizabeth II's younger sister was a party girl who developed a taste for London nightlife in her teen years. And due to her flawless skin and curvaceous figure, Princess Margaret attracted plenty of attention. After a string of sexual affairs with both men and women, Margaret met Tony Armstrong-Jones at a dinner party in 1958. Tony was slim, sandy-haired, handsome, and deeply attracted to Margaret. They married 2 years later, but the relationship was far from ideal. Margaret wasn't faithful at all. She had numerous affairs, and she even slept with Robin Douglas Home, who was one of her husband's former school friends. Tony, meanwhile, had affairs with various other women. But it was Margaret's affair with Roddy Llewellyn, a journalist who was 17 years younger than she was, that finally put an end to the marriage. The pair of them were photographed wearing swimsuits on the island of Mustique, and the scandal that followed led to an overdue divorce between Margaret and Tony.